Before the white-robed Fulani clerics swept through northern Nigeria under the green banner of Usman Dan Fodio's Sokoto Caliphate, before the city of Ilorin became a stronghold of Islamic authority, and long before it was thought of as a Yoruba emirate, Ilorin belonged to another story. A forgotten story. A different kind of conquest. Not by Jihad, but by the Nupe. It's a truth buried in oral traditions, whispered in the twilight of Nupe palaces and hidden in the war songs of fading griots. A truth too often eclipsed by the grand narrative of the Sokoto Jihad. But if we listen closely, we begin to hear something astonishing. Ilorin, the city now known for its Islamic heritage and northern architecture, was once at the crossroads of Yoruba kings, Nupe warriors, and a kingdom whose ambitions defied the geography of the Niger River. This is the story of how the Nupe conquered Ilorin before the Sokoto Jihad ever arrived. A story of ambition, betrayal, bloodshed, and a lost past that reshaped the heart of Nigeria forever. The year is 1790. In the deep valleys and rolling hills of what is now central Nigeria, the Nupe Kingdom was rising, not just in influence, but in military might. Their capital, Raba, sat near the meeting of the Niger and Kaduna rivers, pulsing with trade, strategy, and spiritual pride. The Etsu Nupe, their ruler, was more than just a king. He was a priest-warrior, both feared and revered. His armies moved swiftly, riding the waters of the Niger and marching across the savannas. At the same time, Ilorin was little more than a military frontier of the old Oyo Empire, a strategic outpost on the northern edge of Yoruba land. Controlled by Ara Ona Kakanfo Afonja, the empire's feared general, Ilorin was a Yoruba town, fortified by its walls, torn between the ambitions of Oyo and the resistance of northern frontiers. But it was also vulnerable. The Oyo Empire was cracking from within. Internal strife, court intrigues, and rising discontent brewed under the polished surface of Yoruba aristocracy. Afonja, proud and ambitious, had his eyes on independence. He dreamed of a power beyond the shadow of Oyo. But he needed allies, and that's where the Nupe came in. Historical accounts, including those preserved in the works of Samuel Johnson's History of the Yorubas and in Nupe oral chronicles like the Sud Epic, tell us that long before Fulani forces entered Ilorin in the early 1800s, Nupe warriors had already established themselves as a military presence in the region. Some even say the Nupe were invited. Afonja, seeking to challenge the Oyo throne, reportedly reached out to the Nupe to assist in his rebellion. The Nupe, sensing opportunity, sent detachments of their feared warriors, archers trained in forest warfare, cavalrymen who had tamed the Niger floods, into Ilorin. What began as an alliance turned into something far more dangerous. The Nupe were not mere hired swords. They were empire builders. And Ilorin, with its fertile plains, its position on key trade routes, and its military barracks, was ripe for the taking. Within a few years, Nupe warriors had occupied Ilorin's gates. They built homes, married local women, and slowly wove themselves into the fabric of the city. But they didn't just blend in, they rose. By 1795, the Etsu Nupe had declared Ilorin a client territory. And though this brief period of Nupe dominance is scarcely mentioned in many mainstream Nigerian histories, local traditions among the Nupe and early Ilorin settlers speak of a time when the city answered not to the Sokoto Caliphate, nor the Oyo Empire, but to the drumbeat of the Nupe court. The Nupe brought their culture, their elaborate weaving techniques, their masked dances, their deep knowledge of river navigation, and their war drums, which echoed through Ilorin's dusty courtyards. They enforced tribute, collected taxes, and intermarried with the local elite. They also brought religion, but not yet the militant Islam of the Fulani. The Nupe, at this time, were religiously mixed. Some were Muslim, others animist, still others influenced by Yoruba cosmology. Ilorin became, briefly, a melting pot. A city caught between its Yoruba heritage and Nupe dominion. But empires are fragile things. In 1804, just a decade after Nupe banners flew over Ilorin, a new storm rolled in from the north, one that would reshape the entire region. Usman Dan Fodio had launched his holy war, the Sokoto Jihad, against what he called the corrupt Muslim rulers of Hausaland. His vision was pure, to return Islam to its roots, to fight injustice, and to unite the Hausa states under a caliphate guided by Sharia. But like all great revolutions, it devoured everything in its path. By 1809, Fulani clerics, warriors, and preachers had swept through Gobir, Kano, Katsina, and Zaria. Their eyes turned south toward Ilorin. The Nupe, once dominant, now found themselves surrounded. Their influence waned as Fulani jihadists gained ground across the Middle Belt. And then came the betrayal that would shatter everything. Afonja, once aligned with the Nupe, switched allegiances. He opened Ilorin's gates to a Fulani cleric named Malam Alamai, who came under the guise of religious support. Alamai was charismatic, learned in Islamic law, and ruthless in ambition. At first, he seemed like a spiritual advisor, a friend. But within years, Fulani settlers under Alamai and his son, Abd al-Salam, began to challenge both Afonja's authority and the remaining Nupe presence. Tensions escalated into street violence. Then open war. The Nupe were driven out. Afonja was assassinated, some say stabbed in his own compound by a slave-turned-assassin named Saligbur working with the Fulani. Others claim he was killed in a street riot. Either way, he was gone. And with him, the last trace of Yoruba or Nupe independence in Ilorin vanished. By 1823, Ilorin had become an emirate under the Sokoto Caliphate. Abd al-Salam was crowned the first emir of Ilorin, and the city, once Nupe, once Yoruba, was now Fulani in leadership, Islamic in law, and forever changed. But here's the question no one seems to ask. Why is the Nupe conquest so rarely mentioned? Why is it that history books jump from the Oyo Empire straight into the Sokoto Caliphate, skipping the brief but significant chapter where Ilorin was shaped by Nupe ambitions? The answer, perhaps, lies in the politics of memory. The Nupe, for all their brilliance, lacked the written chronicles that the Fulani scholars preserved. They passed their history through griots, songs, and stories, vulnerable to the erosion of time and the flames of war. Meanwhile, Fulani chroniclers documented their victories meticulously, elevating the Jihad as divine destiny. Yet, even in Ilorin today, if you ask the right elders, in the right tone, you'll still hear whispers of the time the Nupe ruled, of the traders who came by canoe, of the archers in leaf-covered armor, of the drums that beat before the call to prayer. History is not a single thread. It is a tapestry of conquest, resistance, betrayal, and survival. And in the case of Ilorin, it's a tapestry with Nupe patterns woven deep beneath the Islamic calligraphy and Yoruba foundations. So the next time you hear of Ilorin as a Yoruba emirate or as a city born of Jihad, remember this. Before the Fulani, before the imams, before the emirs, there were the Nupe. And perhaps, if we dig just a little deeper into Nigeria's forgotten histories, we may yet find more cities that once belonged to someone else, if only for a moment in time. If this story moved you, or if you know more about the Nupe legacy in Ilorin, share your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video to support hidden African histories, and subscribe to History Off the Map, where the forgotten corners of the past are finally brought to light. Because history isn't always written by the victors. Sometimes, it's sung by those who still remember.